Hello, hopefully you can hear me. I hope everyone is doing well. Let me just get a little bit situated here. Here we go. Let's see here. That's better. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me? I hope. I can check it on my end too. Oh, great. Okay, it looks like it is doing good for the sound. Last live stream, my computer wasn't recognizing my mic, so it got weird. But thank you guys so much for joining today. Here, let me just adjust this a little bit. Go down. You can see my cat hanging out. Hopefully the cats won't be too wild and crazy today. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. Today we're going to be talking about chord change tips and tricks. I posted in the chat. It's also in the description for this video as well. But I do have a handout that's available on my Patreon. It's like a free public post. So you can go in, download that and have it up on your screen, or you can print it out. I have mine printed here. It's a two-sider or 2 pages. The first page is going to be the actual tips and tricks, and then we have a little practice exercise that we're going to be going over in the second half of this. My hope is to make these lessons as short and sweet and condensed as possible, just because I don't want to waste your guys' time, and I want you to be able to get going and applying these skills to your playing as quickly as possible. So that's my hope. But yeah, as we get started though, just as some like reminders of some norms and stuff, I want you guys to 100% ask me all of your questions that you possibly have in the chat. Please just remember, you never know who is also watching. So to be respectful to everyone, please make sure your comments are kind and respectful and avoiding any harsh or foul language. Want to make sure it's nice and family friendly in case there are younger people here, or just in general, you know, it's just a kinder way to address people. But yeah, if you have a question, please put it in there. If I don't get to your question right away, I will definitely have times to pause and then I will go over the questions. So I definitely want to answer whatever questions you may have. And yeah, if you're also just watching this and you're not playing along, or you don't have a ukulele with you, that's totally fine too. There's still a lot that you can learn. And in fact, I would even encourage you, some days you don't even need a ukulele or to be playing to be able to practice. So I say a lot, you know, try to contain your practice time every day to about 10 to 15 minutes. If you watching this live stream is your practice time for today, that is totally fine. Don't feel like you have to then go practice for an hour or something like that too. That's totally not necessary, and sometimes can actually not help you as much when it comes to your actual learning. So yeah, so with that saying, if you're comfortable, I would love to know where you're live streaming from today. It's a very snowy day where I'm at. So like if you want to share whether you're like East Coast or West Coast, you don't have to say the specific location. I'm just curious on where our viewers are from. I'm Central Time, and I teach and operate from the great city of Chicago. So that's where I kind of am based, and it is very snowy here. So, ooh, nice. Canada. Awesome. Oh, hey, Yuki. Yeah. UK. Awesome. Massachusetts. Turkey. Is there a lot of snow going on in the East Coast right now, like with the rest of the country, or Texas? Poor Texas. Awesome. Turkey. Great. So we have quite a few different time zones too. So thank you guys so much. I'm not really sure. Turkey would be ahead. So is it maybe evening for you guys? But yeah, well, awesome. Great. Well, super happy to see you guys. And let's just kind of hop right into it. Netherlands, it's snowing. Nice. All right. So I'm going to go over these tips and tricks. But before we do, if you do have a ukulele at 10 p.m., oh my goodness, it's like, oh, Panama. Awesome. Cool, cool, cool. If you do have a ukulele with you, I'm going to be using this little Novit Mini today. hopefully you can see the frets pretty easy. I'm realizing now maybe I should have picked another one. If for whatever reason it's hard to kind of see what's going on, I know the neck is all black here. I can switch out to a different ukulele too. But first things, of course, make sure your ukulele is in tune. Anytime you play, you should always make sure your ukulele is in tune. I sometimes will try to get away with not tuning, and it never works out for me. You know, I've tuned so many ukuleles in my life now that I kind of have a relative tuning. I can kind of think a G is something like da, da. I was a little bit flat, but I can definitely tune things relative to a pitch. So if I happen to pick one, all the intervals will be correct. But you always want to make sure, unless you have perfect pitch, that you are tuning your ukulele every single time. So a G on the 4th string. I'll pluck this a few times if you don't have a tuner with you. If you don't have a tuner, you can get tuners on your phone for free. They're pretty reliable. The best tuners, of course, are like the kind of clip-on ones because it uses the very vibrations to tell you the frequency of your actual pitch, and then it tells you if it is in a tune or not. But phone ones are pretty good too. The only downside about phone ones is if you have a lot of sound going on in the room, it can be hard for it to pick up the specific one. All right, and then a C on the 3rd string. And then an E on the 2nd string. And then an A on the 1st string. All right. So hopefully your ukulele is all in tune. And again, we're using standard tuning. So if you are playing on a baritone, that would not be the tuning for you. Baritone, oh my gosh, I can't think of it off the top of my head. It's like D, B, G, E, I think. But it's like the top 4 strings of a guitar. All right, so Manchester, awesome. UK, I love UK. England. I actually studied abroad in Winchester when I was in college. So for a couple UK people, if you're familiar with Winchester, I studied abroad there for like 5 months and I loved it. I was supposed to actually be going back to, I've been to London a number of times and I love to travel. So I've been pretty fortunate throughout my life that I've been able to travel a lot. And I was supposed to go to London again with my mom this April, but because of COVID, it's not really working out, unfortunately. Because we don't really know everything that's open and, traveling's hard and stuff right now, but someday soon. I've never been to Manchester though. It's more north, right? Am I making that up or is that accurate? It's like more mid-north. I kind of stayed more to the south in England. Anyway, so let's start first with the tips and tricks. I'm going to go over these quick and model some of them for you. And in the back too, if you are watching this, I will make sure to go in and add the different chapters so you can easily navigate on these different tips and tricks. These are also in no particular order. I kind of just thought about the things that people ask the most questions for, and also the things I noticed people doing, not wrong, but if you were to do these things, your chord changes would be a lot easier for you. So the very, very first one is to make sure you're using the recommended finger positioning. And I do talk about this every single tutorial, and I give you recommendations for where you should be putting your fingers. And the recommendations are not the law. You can change it up. You can make it what works best for you. But most of the time, the recommendations are things that other professionals and educators and a lot of people that have been playing for a very, very long time have recommended. And I do make adaptations to the fingerings when it makes sense with the progression that I'm playing. But typically the recommended fingering is going to be the best for you. Like for instance, the G chord is one people often change up a lot. So G is first finger on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, 2nd finger on the 1st string, and then you have that 3rd finger on the 3rd fret, 2nd string. So this is our G. I'm not really sure how people do that. However, or I'm not sure how people do it this other way I'm about to show you. I've had so many students, for whatever reason, they switch these and they find that to be easier, having your second finger first rather than your first. Typically, when it comes to making the chords, though, you are working from, we'll say this is the left side and this is the right side of the ukulele. You typically want to move from left to right, putting your first, second, third down. The reason why it's really important to have this as your positioning rather than switching those first two fingers is because when you use a G chord, you can kind of go anywhere with chords, to be honest, but often in the songs we play the most, you're moving to a C chord, or you're going to be moving to other chord positions that having your first finger on the third string and your second finger on the first string, it makes it a lot easier to transition there. So if you, hey Tess, if you end up switching those up, you're going to have a lot trickier time. So like, for instance, if I'm moving from a C major progression, C to G to A to F, and then back to G, okay? Or something, I'm just making that up. But if I have my C to the G here, if I'm going C and then I'm switching those, you see my second finger has to move a lot farther in order to get to that next string rather than like here. So again, if I'm moving C, that second finger's already lined up to be able to put it down on that first string a lot. Here, same thing if I'm moving C to G, then moving to A minor and F, okay? Or moving from F to G. If I'm going F and then switching it, I really have to move my hand a lot more. So while it might seem easier initially to do whatever your brain is telling you is easiest, a lot of times the recommendation ends up being easier in the long run when you get to more advanced chords or, you know, different things like that. Yeah, so that's one example of why it's really important to use those recommendations. But again, sometimes things change. So like, for instance, I can't remember the particular song, but it moved from a D major chord to a D7 chord here. And normally D7, or at least the easy version, or sometimes it's called the Hawaiian D7, it's normally played with your first finger and second finger right here. But because we're in that D major position, it's just easier to lift your second finger here versus having to lift both of them and then put them back down. So sometimes it does work to make adaptations like that, or I've done that before with, I can't remember the particular song with like C minor, for instance. I had to do like a C minor here and then move to something else that was like down the fretboard. And it made more sense to play the C minor like a D major chord versus a barred chord. So again, all of those things are good things to keep in mind, but make sure you're doing it for a purposeful reason, not just because that's where your fingers land. Now, for me, I have to think about putting them in the wrong position just because I've played it so many times. But again, it's about making all the things you do very purposeful rather than an accidental thing. If you look at your hand and it just happens to be in that position, that's not really what you want it to do. You want it to be a purposeful movement. And that's something I say a lot of times. What's the difference between noise and music, for instance, is that music is meant to be organized in some sense. It's purposeful sound rather than noise. It's not always, it might be you made that noise on purpose, but it's not supposed to be creating something other than noise, if that makes sense. Oh, that's awesome. I don't know if you can see in the chat, someone was saying that they got a ukulele for Christmas and they already know 14 songs. And that's awesome. It's one of the best things about ukulele. I think it's just such a fun, quick way to be able to pick up and start playing. All right. So that was tip number 1. Tip number 2, when learning a new chord, make sure you've mastered it before adding it to a strumming pattern. I see this a lot where people will learn a brand new chord, and I've done it myself, and then they try to insert it right away into a strumming pattern before they actually have it fully mastered. And I say this a lot in my tutorials. Mastered means you don't really have to look at the chord diagram anymore. You have it memorized so that the chord diagram is a reference should you need it. But for the most part, when you see just an A or something or whatever chord it happens to be, you know exactly how to make that position. One example for me in particular, a year ago or something like that, I did a playthrough for the theme song from Mario Odyssey. And in that song, there were 2 new chords for me. There was the F minor and then the E flat. And it transitioned between those 2. And I had a really, really hard time initially playing through that song because I was like, oh, I just want to play it and get it done really quickly. So when it came time for those transitions, I had a really hard time because I couldn't remember off the top of my head what is the position for that F minor. Now, sometimes I still have to like glance at my hand when it's like a big leap or something. That's okay. You're still what I would consider to be in that like mastery level where you can apply the strumming pattern. But if you have to look at the diagram and then look at your hands and then create the shape, those are too many steps. So do yourself a favor and just play on chord changes or just play on a simple beat strum where you're just playing on down strums before adding a full strumming pattern, because it's making your brain do too many things. Number 3, look at the fingering for the next chord you are playing and find similarities between that and the current chords you're playing. We're actually going to be practicing this in a little bit, but a lot of times there's a lot of shared strings or shared frets or something like that going on between the different chords. And a big part of that is based in theory. So I'm actually going to be I'm really excited about this. On my Patreon, I often have a lot of different polls and things like that, or I ask my patrons for recommendations of what they'd like to see on the channel. And I'm really excited that I gave them 2 options, and the one that they decided that they wanted to see the most was talking about music theory in relation to ukulele. And so I'm really excited that starting in March, we're going to be starting to really look at theory and how it applies to the instrument. And I think once we start to connect some of these things, and it's going to be laid out in a very beginner-friendly way, you don't have to have previous experience or anything. It's going to make a lot of sense of why you do different things technique-wise. So when I'm saying about the shared things of chords, music theory-wise, you need shared pitches a lot of the times to make progressions sound good, or the reason like it. There's a lot that has to go into it, but a lot of times when you're dealing with a particular chord, like for instance, if I go from a C to G, it makes sense to move to that C to a G, and why it sounds good to the ear is because there are shared pitches. So in a C chord, we have the pitches of G, C, E, C. In the G chord, we have G, D, then G, and then we have the, oh my gosh, A sharp and B. My goodness, mind right now. But it has that shared G. It's like that little hook that makes it so you can like kind of pivot to the next chord. That's in that particular example. I'm not maybe doing the best job at explaining it right now. When you have shared pitches between the chords, often in the chord positioning that you're going to be playing, there are also shared strings or shared frets that's taking place on. So when you see a good example, for instance, is like the F to the D minor, you're using a lot of the same pitches to create that D minor. You're just changing this one. So again, if we look at a lot of songs, you move from like a D minor to an F, or an F to a D minor. And if you look at the pitches here, we have the same A, then C, and this is for F, F, and then A. Okay, so those are the pitches for the F chord. Now, if I put down my third finger for the D minor, the only thing that's changing is we have now the A, D, F, A. So the only thing that's changing is making that C go to a D. but you still have all those shared pitches. So it makes a lot of sense that you have a shared or similarities between the different chords. So hopefully that made sense. Stay tuned for the music theory for ukulele series. It'll make a lot more sense. And I would say too, for that series, what my plan is, we'll see how it shakes out. My plan is to release like a short video, like 5-ish minutes on Wednesdays on my skill days, explaining what's going on. And then like every other Friday have live streams like this that go into further detail. So you can watch the video on Wednesdays and then we'll work on it with like exercises to solidify those skills. So that's the goal, but we'll see how it all works out. At the very least though, we'll still be doing live streams on them. All right. Number 4, lift your fingers as little as possible. Why do more work if you don't have to? So a really good example, like I was just demonstrating with the F chord to the D minor. If I'm moving from an F, it makes 0 sense to lift up my whole hand to put it back down for the D minor when the only finger that's really moving is this 3rd finger. So if you can do less work, that's way better, and it's going to make those a lot smoother of a transition for you. So it does take an extra step to think about, okay, what chord am I transitioning to and what similarities are there? But when you can do those and eventually you kind of get into a rhythm where it becomes a very like one sweep, you're kind of doing this, it gets a lot easier. So yeah, lift your fingers as little as possible and it makes the transitions a lot smoother. Number 5, if you don't have the chords memorized, do not use a strumming pattern. It's better to simplify the pattern until you have the chords mastered. That kind of goes off of tip number 2. So again, having it mastered is the ability to like have the chord memorized. You don't have to look at the chord diagram, but also you can still play it on a more simple strumming pattern. If you're doing like picking, it's the same thing. If you don't know exactly what chords you're making, do a simpler picking for it too. If you're doing something with chucking is that extra step with the strumming pattern. Take away the chucking and just do the regular strumming pattern and see if that's easier for you. Number 3, thumb placement matters. This one's huge. Okay. So especially with some chords like barred chords, if I'm making a B flat chord here, okay, and I don't have my thumb in a really good position for a pivot, there are some songs that will go from like B flat to B. This is so much easier to do when my thumb is in the correct position for it versus trying to like, if I was like, if I wasn't holding the ukulele correctly and I was maybe holding it so you don't see any space here, or I was using my palm to rest the head on, not only is this going to add a lot of tension to your wrist, but it makes it really hard for those transitions. So honestly, I don't even know if I can make a B flat in that position. So there's my B flat. If I move down, it makes it really hard to do that. Whereas if my thumb is in the right position, I can make the chord sound a lot better. And what I mean by sounding is not sounding to the ear. I'm talking about making the actual strings sound, making them make sound. So that really matters too. Same thing, the song I just did, I think it's the last one that was released on Wednesday, was Drift Away. There's a transition there of a C minor to the D, I think, on something away, or I don't have the chords with me. What is that? One sec. I have it over here. Let me grab it. Okay. The example I'm talking about, I just have the lead sheet to Drift Away here, is, oh yeah. So to play, happily watching her drift away. I'm out of the key at the moment, but that's another good example of when I'm moving from that C minor here to the D. I have to rest on my leg a little bit. Let me see if I can get this high. So right here, if I'm barring the C minor, I have my thumb in the back. Now I'm going to move to the D minor, or the just regular D. So you can see that was a pretty easy transition because my thumb wasn't moving at all. It was in a really good spot to pivot. So again, I'm going to show you that C minor. Now I'm going to pivot My thumb didn't move at all. Back to C minor, to the D. And it's a pretty smooth transition because my thumb is where it's supposed to be. So that was illustrating that point. Number 7, a strap can help a lot. There are lots of times where this particular one does not have the strap buttons plugged in. One thing I really like about Enya brand ukuleles, and full disclosure, I'm an Enya music artist, so I do like endorse their instruments, but I wouldn't do it if they weren't great. Their brand has been one of my favorites for a really long time. So one thing I love about their particular instruments in particular is actually all of the ukuleles I've ever seen of theirs, except for the Nova Mini here, has the strap buttons built in. And why that's really, really important is because then you can put a strap on. There are straps that hook on to sound holes. I don't think they work very well though. I like the ones that go around, and I don't use a lot of straps, to be honest, but if you're doing a lot of barred chords and the transitions are very quick, a strap can very much help to keep it from falling, or even to something like I was just talking about with that C minor to that D transition. It's like it pivots. If I were playing this with a bigger instrument and I wasn't holding it up so high on me, it'd be a lot easier to make that transition. But straps can really, really help with that. If I wanted to play it really, really high up. Let me grab another ukulele to illustrate this. All right, I have this one. Where are my straps? I don't actually know what I did with them. I may have hid my straps because my cats like to play with them. Here, I can grab one from down here. Sorry, I have like stuff just everywhere, as you can see. Here's another one. I normally have some hanging out, but I don't know what I did with them. So this is the same series. It's just the concert size of that Nova. And if I put a strap on really quick, I'm not sure if this is in tune or not. It's pretty close. So if I were to put this strap on, it's in my hair. I wanted this to be really high up. I can make it tight and have it sit a lot easier high up. Yeah, I could show the positioning again for that swisheroo. So here's that C minor here. It's the D. All right. So I'm just pivoting, keeping my thumb in the same place. But you can see now that the strap's up, it's not really falling, and I can a lot easier make that transition here without it falling. Whereas with the one without the strap, I have to take this off. I can't have them both on at the same time. Whereas without the strap, I don't think it's difficult, but it definitely adds that extra challenge to it when playing it super high up. So straps can really, really help with that. And yeah, like I said, all of the Enya ones that I've ever seen, except for the Mini U, all have them built in. Even that circle one over there has it built in too. So, and that's in their starter series. So yeah, so I really, really like that. And it does really help for people. Plus, straps are really cute. I wish I knew where mine were at the moment. I honestly have no idea where I put them. But they come in really cute designs, and they can really add a lot of personality to your ukulele too. So that can be something that can really help with those chord transitions too. So a lot of people tell me often that like, oh, when I go to change chords, the ukulele falls down. And that can be fixed with making sure you're squeezing or gripping enough, because as you can see, I can just hold it here and I won't even use my arm to support it. It doesn't maybe get the best sound, but I'm not using my other arm to keep it up. Now, similarly, you can press it against your body a little bit more. And it goes with the whole idea of you only really need to be moving your wrist. The goal is to get the best possible sound out of as little movement as possible, because every single movement you make should be super purposeful. And if you're going to be using a movement to make it super effective. So, you don't have to move your whole arm to strum. You're just using your wrist here. And you can use the rest of your arm to keep it up. Any straps or stores y'all would recommend? Yes. I believe the ones that I have I just buy them on Amazon. You can get like very nice like leather ones and stuff too. I'm not actually a big fan of leather. I don't like the smell. When I was little, I don't know if maybe this is dating me. I don't feel like I'm that old though, but I don't think they exist anymore. But when I was really little, at our mall in town, I come from a very small town in Wisconsin. And so we'd have to like drive to go to a mall. And it was like a big deal. But one of the stores there was called Wilson's Leather. And I don't know if you have ever heard of this place, but it's all leather store. It had this very distinct smell. And so my mom would go in to like go look at all the leather goods, and I would just be like stuck in the store with her, and I just could not stand the smell. So I'm not a big fan of leather, but you can get really nice leather ones that hook on, and those are beautiful. Yeah, some people love the smell of Wilson's. It just didn't fit well with me for whatever reason, but I just get mine on Amazon. I've been trying in this year to really do my research when it comes to buying from brands in general, to try to support companies that are either small business or ones that are sustainable, that like, or donate part of their proceeds and profit to the environment. So I can't tell you specifically any that are like that. However, Cloud9 is what I've purchased from before on Amazon, and they're very affordable. Like I've been able to get some really cute ones for less than $10, and they work great. So that's what I recommend. And I like the colors a lot, but I will do some research though to see if I can find some options that are from sustainable brands or something like that, or like small businesses, just if you're interested in that. I haven't found any yet, but that's also partially because I haven't really done the work to look for it. Another question is, my uke doesn't have strap buttons. What can I do? So I've never personally done this before, but they do make strap buttons that you can drill in yourself. I would be very worried about that, to be honest, if you were doing it yourself and you've never done it before, just because depending on the ukulele you have, if it's a laminate wood, it may split very, very easily. And laminate wood, like this one, for instance, and this one, these are carbon fiber, which it's not exactly, but it's like, it's not a plastic ukulele, but it's kind of in the similar vein. The material's carbon fiber. You wouldn't be able to drill into something like that, for instance. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could probably like super glue it or Gorilla Glue into the correct positions on your ukulele. But most of the strap buttons I've seen have little drills in it. You could also buy them and then take it to a music shop, and they may have the correct tools to be able to do that. But I've never personally put in strap buttons into a ukulele before, and it'd make me nervous doing it myself. But definitely it's a thing that you could do. Otherwise, they make straps, and you know what? I don't have an example of this one, I don't think, anymore, because I gave away the ukulele to someone. But they do make straps that they have little hooks that you can hook onto the sound hole, and then the strap goes around your neck and it sits. I have an example of one here. Let me see if I can grab the video and I can link it in the chat. I did a review of a ukulele around the holiday times. It's the highest reviewed ukulele on Amazon, because I was just kind of curious about what people were buying. And sorry, you're going to hear the video in a second. Here we go. I'll get the link for you. This is an example. You see an example in that particular video. So if you want to watch that, you can, but you can buy them just on your own. The problem I find with those is they don't really actually support the ukulele much, at least in my experience. And I've tried a number of them. Ooh, that's cool. All right. So Jessica is saying Outdoor Ukulele Co. has uke buttons that stick on. Outdoor Ukulele Co. I'm just checking them out right now. Oh my gosh, made in Bend, Oregon. Cool. Accessories. Yeah, I'll definitely check them out just because, yeah, I'm looking for good accessory companies. So that's awesome if they have them that stick on. Yeah, but if you were to go to like a music shop where they specialize in like repairs on instruments and things like that, they would definitely know how to put them on an instrument. So that is also an option too. But thank you so much for recommending that particular company. Yeah. So, and then number 8, our last one. So you can't really see that at all. Our last one. Make sure there is space between the fretboard and your palm. You should not be using your palm to support the ukulele. Use the strength of your thumb and fingers. And I kind of already demonstrated that, where you do not really need, like, I'll just to hold it up. It's harder, but you shouldn't really have to rely on holding it like this. If you're first learning and you start doing this, it can feel good potentially. The problem is when you get into more advanced playing, it really does get hard to be able to do those transitions. And what I'm talking about with the space is, like, I'm in a G major chord, for instance, right now, and you can tell my thumb is behind the neck board. Everything's in the right position. What you can't see looking straight on, though, is if I were to move the ukulele this way, you see all this space right here? That's a ton of space between, and it allows me to be able to pivot up to get to different chords. It allows me to be able to jump to get to different chords. That space is really, really, really important. If I didn't have that space and I was making my G major chord and I was relying on my palm to keep my ukulele up, it gets a lot harder. Like, you can hear, I'm still making the sound, but it gets a lot harder to be able to do those transitions. A lot of beginner players, I see that's kind of the number one thing that they're doing. They're resting in their palm. And yes, it is harder to get this transition, but I promise you, you'll think back on the times where you rested on your palm and you'll be like, why did I ever do that to myself? Because it adds a lot of tension in your wrist that really does hurt over time. You know, it's actually very surprising. A lot of my professional musician friends, they have all at some point, we've talked about the ways in which their beginning lessons caused a lot of problems for them down the road. And it's really sad because sometimes you have, and it's a big reason too why if you ever take private lessons with someone, regardless of the instrument you're playing, make sure to check out their credentials and to make sure that they know their stuff. Like, ask around if they're recommended multiple times from people, then take those lessons with them, because if you get bad advice early on, it can really mess up your playing. I went to school for vocal music, and I feel comfortable like giving people advice and coachings for music and stuff. But there's a difference between like vocal coaching and voice lessons. And I wouldn't give voice lessons, for instance, just because there's a lot of stuff pedagogically I don't know quite as much as like somebody that maybe has their master's or that spent another 2, 3, 4 years specifically learning how the inner intricacies of the voice work. And that's specifically because I also had voice lessons from various people when I was younger. And as I learned more and went to college and stuff, I realized a lot of the stuff they told me to do were very unhealthy. A lot of things, unfortunately, even like choir directors sometimes teach when they're in a group setting, is not very healthy for singing. And the same thing is true for instrument playing. I have friends that the piano teachers they had when they were young were taught them to do really bad stuff that actually caused physical problems for them in their wrists. Or they tried to do things that were like really old school methods that weren't healthy too. So really make sure the people that you are taking private lessons from are like legit. Just because they're like really good performers or something doesn't mean they're always going to be the best teachers. And maybe they were taught in a different school of thought that's no longer really acceptable or healthy now. So just be aware of all those different things. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now. Back to ukulele. But yeah, so make sure that you, it's better to be able to play less things, but play it correctly than be able to play a ton of different things and not do it correctly. And you're going to be causing a lot of problems for yourself. I think about it myself a lot. I have terrible posture. So you see a lot of times in my videos, I'm slouched over. That's mainly because I had really bad posture growing up. And as a vocalist, when I was like in school and like really thinking about it all the time, it corrected a lot of itself. And then when I got into my first years of teaching, I started to go back to bad posture, and then I corrected it, and then I got hit by a car, and then I went back into bad posture for a while again. So it's something I'm always trying to remind myself of. So like posture's a thing too. If you're using good posture, sitting up straight, making sure your shoulder blades are back and comfortable. I'm not saying like we're not talking about like a soldier salute thing, but it's the same thing with your hands. Somebody's asking, they are just now starting to learn the ukulele and they've never learned an instrument. Do you have any tips? Yeah. So if you're brand new, I would recommend starting with my Let's Play series for ukulele. And while, of course, I'm definitely like, check out my videos and everything too, but I do really think the best thing you can do for yourself if you've never played an instrument before is just to invest in like, now is probably hard because of COVID, but to invest in like a couple in-person lessons. You know, when I am trying to learn a different instrument, luckily I have a lot of musician friends that are teachers that teach private lessons and stuff in my life, so I'm able to reach out to them. But if I were to learn a brand new instrument, like for instance, I've never played trumpet before in my life, but say I wanted to play trumpet, I would probably like learn everything I could, watch some videos maybe on learning trumpet, and then I'd actually seek out someone in person that I could get a couple like a couple lessons in person, even if it's over Skype or something or over Zoom. And the same thing with ukulele. Like I want to be able to help you as much as I possibly can, but there's a huge difference between me being able to make tutorials for you, me being able to do these live streams for you and give you a lot of this information, and also being able to work with someone one-on-one for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes at a time. I don't do lessons in that format at this time just because it doesn't work with my schedule. I'm a full-time teacher too, so that's what I'm doing during the day. Like today we're doing this early live stream because my school happens to be on like winter break, so that's kind of the reason why that works out. But yeah, definitely try. And I know sometimes money can be something that gets in the way of that, but even if it's like a group class or something, just anything that can, so someone can see physically what you're doing. And even some of my patrons that are watching right now, I always tell them like, send me a video of you playing so I can see exactly what you're doing, because it's really hard to be able to work with somebody. And I'm going to say like work with somebody without them being able to see and without them being able to like really see the intricacies of what you're doing with your body. Because that's where a lot of those bad habits can form, is when you don't have someone to be able to give you that feedback. So yeah, if you're brand new, watch whatever videos you can. I have that Let's Play series that if you do the things I tell you to do, you'll be set up with some really good basics, but nothing's ever going to replace someone sitting in front of you, whether it's on a camera, but having that live interaction. Nothing's going to replace that, in my opinion, at least. Yeah, so those are all of the tips for chord changes that I have. We're going to move on to practicing with a song. So if you were watching for my last live stream, and it got linked somewhere in the chat, I gave you guys just full access to the lead sheet of LOVE. For the handout, I've done pretty much the same thing. It's broken into an A section and a B section. The only difference is there's like an instrumental interlude. We're not doing that on the ukulele right now. And then the second time you go back into the B section, you do a little like tag where you just repeat the last line a few times. We're going to be moving on to that, so where we're actually going to be looking at a real song and looking at the different techniques and tips and tricks that I gave you. So if you can pull it up on your computer, apologies, I know I still don't have a system where I can like display things yet on my computer, but I'll just like hold this for now. Is this like reversed? Can you read it as if it's a regular paper? Like in my screen, it's backwards to me, but can you guys see it front way or the be able to read it left to right. If someone could let me know, that'd be great. Hopefully it's not backwards. Like, can you see this? All right, unless someone says you can't, I'm going to assume you can. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to look at the chords. What chords share the same strings, fret, or finger positioning. So these are all of the chords we're using in this song. And this is not in the original key. I made an easy version of it because a lot of times jazz songs are not in super easy keys. So I did change things up so you can see it easier. But you can see we have a C major chord, a D7, an F major, a D minor, and a G7. Now, F major and D minor, we already talked about the similarities between the two, where I just have down here, F and D minor share the first and second finger position. So if you're going to be transitioning between those two chords, you only need to add that third finger. So you do not need to lift up. But the D minor and the G7 also share the same first finger position and the second fret here. So if I'm moving from a D minor to a G7, you can see my first finger stays put, and I'm just moving those two fingers over. Do you see that? So again, D minor to G7, and they're just each moving over a string. So you really do not have to move a whole lot. Because I know it can be really tempting to be like, okay, here's my D minor. Now I'm going to move completely to the G7. But if you can skip that, it's a lot easier to make that transition. And with the D minor and G7, we make that transition a lot in this song. Now, there's not a particular shared thing between the D7 and the C major, but luckily what is nice about that transition is when it does happen, here's your C major. Your D7 is made with fingers 1 and 2, and those are open. So when you go to make that switch, those fingers are open and available. So you can be in that C major and then move to the D7 really easily because your first and second finger aren't really doing anything. So just taking this extra step to actually look at the chords and break it down is really, really important. Oh, I'm rocking my table, sorry. It is really important to being able to really come to a good understanding and be able to play the song a lot easier. You want to be able to look at your song and maybe get to a place where you're playing it really, really efficiently after maybe 3 run-throughs of it. The first time to get familiar with the chords and the order and the progression, the second time to get familiar with the strumming pattern, and the third time to put it all together. If you've played the song like 10 times all the way through and you still don't really have a good grasp on what's going on in the song, that's a great indication for you to pause and then start breaking it up. Because this is what professional musicians do as well. The difference is, like when I approach a song, I'm not going to write it out like this, but that's just because I've been doing this for like 17 years and I don't necessarily need to do that. Now, ukulele specifically, I should say, like, I've been doing music stuff for a very long time. Ukulele specifically for about 2.5, 3 years. Now, when I first started playing ukulele, I definitely had to break it down in this way. But I only knew to do that because I'd been doing that for so many years with vocal music. And I do the same thing. I think of like, what ways can I easily transition to the next note? Like all of those different things, everything we just took a few minutes to do of looking at the chords, that's all practice. Those are all things that you can incorporate into your daily practice. You do not have to be physically playing the instrument for it to count as practice. Sometimes practice is just mental work that you're doing too. So after going through those different chords and looking at the similarities between them so you can have it mapped out in your brain and know where the transitions are happening, then it's time to look at where those actual transitions are occurring in the song and how often they are occurring. So I can't read this backwards, but in the A section, I have it noted down here. You have a D minor to G7 transition 2 times in the A section and 3 times in the B section. So thinking to yourself, all right, when I'm playing through this first section, I know I need to really, really hone in on keeping that first finger in place when I'm transitioning from the D minor to the G7. Now, same thing. You have a G7 to C transition in A and B section, and your third finger is really close to those chords. So if I'm here for my G7, I only have to slide down my third finger here. All right. The easy transition doesn't always have to mean that it's shared with the same string, because it is here. I have my third finger on that first string. I just have to slide it down to get to that C. I do not need to pick up my whole finger. Now I'm picking up just a little bit. I don't know if you can, maybe it's the best way you can see it. I'm picking up a little bit just to move it, but you could also slide it down and that'd be fine too. Another transition spot we have is from the C to F transition in both A and B sections. Your C only uses the third section, so you can prep to get to the F. So you use your first and second finger to make that F chord. You don't need to use your C. So it's the same thing with the D7 chord that I was talking about before. If you're from here and you have to move to the F chord, you should already be thinking about that F position while you're playing your C, because those fingers are not doing anything. Now, this comes into a problem if you don't remember about our first tip of using the recommended strumming or the recommended chord positions, because I often see people using their second finger for their C major chord. And if you're moving to that F, you're gonna have to do a lot more work to move it over versus having those two fingers free, okay? And yeah, and there's a little section for notes, but I'm just gonna play through the A section here. What I want you to do is really, really look at my hands and what they're doing, okay? And you can see I'm not lifting up my fingers a lot. I'm literally doing as little work as possible so I can focus on still singing and so I can still focus on making the best sound I possibly can, okay? So I'm starting with my C here. I need to cross my legs to get my ukulele up a little bit. That's also a little tip. I don't even know if it's a tip, but you see sometimes in my playthroughs, it probably looks like I'm just being really casual. But I often will like sit on my feet or cross my legs just to get the ukulele up a little higher to get it into the camera. If I'm playing where I don't have to worry about a camera, I will sit with my feet, both feet on the ground, and play it in like the best position I can. But if you are looking for a way to get it a little higher and you don't have a strap, you can cross your legs. That works too. It's not like the best for your singing position, but honestly, if you're sitting down, like standing is going to be best for your playing and for your singing in general. So, all right, so here's just section A. Watch my fingers, see what little amount that they're doing, okay? I don't remember what the strumming pattern is, but I'm just going to do this. It's just down, down, up, up, down, and it's with a little bit of a swung beat, okay? So I have this. L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. B is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore can. Okay, so I'm going to play that again slower now that you kind of saw it in action. There are a few points I really want to just pick out for you. So starting with that C on L is for, now look at my fingers. Did you see it? Watch again. L is for, they're already moving to that D minor position. So L is for, because they're just open, not doing anything. Only thing I had to move was that one on C. Look at me, and that's another example. I just moved it over from the D minor to the G7. Then I'm gonna just move it right back. D O is for the, or sorry, I'm on D minor. O is for the only, move down, just move down. I didn't even lift up my finger, just slid it down. One I see. Now look, my fingers are doing it again. I'm not even really paying attention to this. Literally, they're just doing it on their own because I'm so used to just doing it that my fingers are just doing it without me really thinking about it. But again, I'm on that V is very, very, very F extraordinary. D7 to the F to the D7 is really the only one that there's no trick to it. You just got to move it. So the extraordinary is even more than anyone that you adore. And that's another thing where you can do too. You can just strum it. And I think in the tutorial, that's what I do. I have it on the strumming pattern for that D7, and then anyone that you adore. And then I move down for C because that's our B section. All right. So those are just a couple examples of things and what you can do to prep yourself while your fingers aren't really doing anything. Like I said, with like my fingers, I've never seen myself do it at the same time in a mirror. But they just kind of retract to get ready and to prep. There's all of that time where you're doing your strumming pattern, just sitting there on your C major, that you can just move to your F or your D minor. And that can actually be a really good trick too. I don't really have a setup in my apartment where I can do that easily, but if you have a large mirror or something at home, stick it in front of you or record yourself or play in front of a video so you can see what your hands are doing, because chances are you're probably staring at the lead sheet or at the scrolling text or something like that on the screen. So you're not necessarily maybe going to be looking at your hand unless you have it memorized, and that's fine too. But yeah, so that's section A. I'm going to do the same thing for section B. Then I'm going to play through it first so you can just watch, and then I'll break it apart for you. And again, all this breaking apart, this is all stuff that's going on in my head as I'm playing it, but I'm doing that and I'm able to do that because I've practiced these things so often. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't have my brain do all that at the same time, that's okay. I don't expect you to. You practice and get to that point. Like, if you're not there, it's okay. I have 17 years of professional music training and stuff doing this, and I've applied that to an instrument. And I would say that does very much help. While I have not played, like ukulele is not my first instrument, it's not even what I consider my main instrument, I can apply everything I've learned about music to that instrument. So it does make it easier when you know a lot about music and you can jump from different instruments. My husband's like that. He's annoyingly talented. I mean, I love him so much, obviously, but he can pretty much play anything because he has his basic skills of theory and know-how of how instruments work and stuff, that he can jump around to different instruments so easily and be able to execute playing them with such a high level of skill, even without having played so long, because he's able to transfer that knowledge to the different things. So keep all that in mind. Anyway, B section. Sorry, I'm a rambler. Here's the B section. L is all that I can give to you. So again, this is a lot of the same transitions. More than ever, just a game for two. Two in love can make it. Take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me and, love was made for me and you. All right. So in the B section, even though I messed up a few times, it's a lot of the same stuff that we talked about from the A section. So moving through it slowly, again, we have that C and my two fingers are empty. So I'm just going to get those ready for the transition. Then I'm moving from my D minor to my G7, back to the D minor, and I'm not lifting up that first finger, back to G7, and then I'm just sliding it down for the C and lifting my fingers up. Two in love can make it. Now I'm on my F, take my heart, but please don't break it. That's that one where you just have to practice that transition from F to D7. And this, if you're struggling with that, if gaining in time, what I'm doing right now, that's what I recommend you doing. Just chunk it. Practice that little transition. And what you want to do is start first with the transition between the two. It's not just going F, D7, F, D7. It's F to D7, back to F, back to D7. From there, you want to widen it to the transitions before. So if I'm on a C first, then I move to my F, then my D7. Once I'm secure at that, then I'm going to widen it to the next chord after the D7. So C, F, D7, back to C. All right, and you can see even too with that D7, my third finger is totally open.
it's like begging for something to go on with that third finger right there. It's bored. So put it to work. Just move it right there and lift up your other two. And then finally, with love was made for me and you. All right. So it's all about chunking it. It's all about looking at those very, very specific little transitions. And I know all that can seem like a lot of work, but just for a second, think to yourself, how much time have you spent on a song frustrated because you're not able to play it exactly how you want, and you've maybe played it like 10 times through and you're still coming up with the same problems that you were doing the first time you played it? That happens so often for people that if you were to pause, really hone in on the area that you're having trouble, rather than reinforcing the mistake, start fixing the mistake and doing it correctly. You're going to cut your practice time in half because you're not practicing the stuff that you can do right away and you got down. You're just practicing the stuff that you need to improve on and need to get better at. So just think about that. It's all about reworking and retooling how you're thinking about it in your perspective. So yeah, that's kind of all the things. That's looking at or taking those tips and tricks that I gave you at the first part and applying them directly to a song. Now, not every song is maybe going to have perfect transitions, but honestly, what I did here with LOVE, I could literally do with every song and find ways that can make it a lot easier for you and ways that are going to simplify it and make the transitions a lot more clear. Using 2 and 3 fingers. So someone is asking, so using 2 and 3, or like, are you talking about your second and third fingers? So using 2 and 3 fingers for the D. So you're saying doing this from F. So you could do that. But again, that's like a very specific transition that is only potentially going to apply for this. I still think it's easier to use the correct one and to practice moving from F major to that D7, because in almost all those situations, you're still going to have to go to that C. So for instance, if you're doing this, or so F to then D7, now that third finger is busy. So when you have to go back to the C, you're going to have to move it fully rather than skip and pivot. So it's not necessarily about whether it's wrong or right. It's about what's best going to serve you. So if in this particular song, it's going to serve you best to make that adaptation, then do it. But just be aware, it's like something cut off your nose to spite your face, or is that the saying? You're making it easier in one way, but it's going to be making something else harder. So it's really what you prefer. I personally think it's better to learn it with the correct chord positioning in this particular situation, because then when you apply it to another song, you're going to potentially be thinking about the alternative strumming or position that you're using. Also, something to think too is you often have a lot of songs too that have that F to the D minor to a D7. So yeah, I think it's just better to practice that for now. But again, if it serves you best to make the adaptation, you do you, but just make sure you're really doing it for a purposeful way and it makes sense within the full idea and the full scheme of the song, and not because it's just going to be like the quick fix. Don't put a Band-Aid on the problem, actually fix it. All right, another question. I'm struggling with getting my chord transition smooth. I can make the shape and it's just not quick enough. I'm not sure what I should be working on to get it to sound right. So if you are working on the transitions and it's just not quick enough, that's probably because you're not quite at the mastery level for those chords yet. So that was one of the things I had mentioned. If you're not quite at the place where you're getting the transitions really smooth, you got to take away something. So in most cases, that's going to be the strumming pattern. Play it on an easier strumming pattern, either on a chord change pattern or on a down strum until you can get it perfectly, and then move on to adding the strumming pattern. If the full strumming pattern up to tempo is too hard, slow down the tempo. So this is the tempo I was doing. I don't know exactly what that beat per minute is, but you could easily just do a really slower one. And it does slow down everything, but it gives you more time. L that's a lot more obtainable than L is for the way you look at me. You know, it gives you almost a good look at me. So 1, 2, 3 versus 1. Yeah, there's about a second in between those two chords doing it at tempo versus slowing it down. You've almost like 3 seconds to transition. So slowing down the tempo can definitely help when you're working on that transition until you can do it smoothly, and then just increase your tempo little by little until you can get it spot on. Another question, I can't play all of the B chords. What can I do? When you mean B chords, do you mean barred chords or the flat chords, or literally just like a B chord? Can you clarify what you mean by B chords? There's also a sneeze in there somewhere in my nose. Oh, bar chords. Yes. That's okay. A lot of people struggle with bar chords. I really struggled when I first started playing too. Again, it's about mastery and about getting comfortable with it. Have you watched my tips and tricks for bar chord video yet? I can, here, let me look it up really quick. Sorry, excuse my weird sounds I make. Bar chords. So, oh, you're probably going to hear sound. My bad. Okay, so here's the link to that video. Check out that video first. It has a lot of tips and tricks. A lot of it is about making sure your thumb, it's really a lot about the thumb is in the right position. And then also using your second finger to help support. A lot of times people think it has to be all your first finger. That's not the case. Also, sometimes you bar chords with more than just your first finger too. So, you know, I'm at a point where I don't need to play some, but you can see often if you're barring with your first finger, you don't need to use your second finger. So you can just lay that on top to get some extra pressure. The B flat is one that you only have that first finger, but you're only barring 2 strings. So it's not as hard. Also, getting your calluses will help. I don't know if you can see, my video camera might not be, you can kind of see the little ripples in my finger. Those are from all the bar chords. So I have really thick calluses on the tips of my fingers, and they're starting to work their way down the more bar chords you play. So calluses also help with that, but thumb positioning and then using that second finger to place over your first will also really help with that. But yeah, are there any other questions that people have? We have a couple minutes left. I know I had said I was going to try to shoot for like 40 minutes, but that did not happen. The more we do live stream lessons and stuff, the better I'll get with my time management with that. So, but yeah, if there aren't any other questions, I hope you guys found this helpful. Like I said, I'm planning out the music theory thing at the moment. So I'd like to, at a minimum, keep an every other Friday live stream going on. Most times, I can tell you, most times they're going to be probably about 5 p.m. Central, just because that's when I kind of get home from work and everything. This was like a special one because I happen to have the day off. But yeah, most will be later in the day too. So I hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys get some practice. We have a tutorial coming out this Sunday for an Elton John song that my patrons voted on. So I hope you guys check that out. And I know I've mentioned a lot of stuff about Patreon and everything. If that is something you guys are interested in, feel free to check it out. If it's not for you or it doesn't work in your budget or anything, that's totally fine too. But yeah, when you are one of my patrons though, it does get you a lot more access to a lot more personalized help from me. Depending on your tier level and stuff, you get access to all the lead sheets, which can be really helpful. And also, all my patrons get access to a variety of different worksheets and things that I also have available for you guys too. So if it is something you're interested in, check it out. And if not, I really appreciate you guys just hanging out and viewing too. Thank you guys so much. Oh, I promise you, Steven Universe stuff will be coming out. I have some time coming up, so I'm looking forward to actually finishing the series. Somebody had recommended escapism to me. the other day too. So I'm kind of looking at that one because it's a nice little ditty as well. But yeah, so I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I hope you continue to. Alrighty, I will see you guys next time in probably about a week and a half. Or sorry, in about 2 weeks, we'll do another live stream, but I'll make sure to post on my channel when that's happening. Come along with me. I actually have Come Along With Me already. It's a play along, I believe. I don't think I have a tutorial for it, but I do on my channel. If you go to my playlist, I've been trying to organize everything pretty well for you. It's in my cartoon songs playlist, but I do have the tutorial for it. It gives you the strumming pattern and all the chords you need. So yeah, so check that out if you would like to. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. If you want to keep up with things I'm doing more on a day-to-day basis, you can always check me out at Cory Teaches Music on Instagram too. I'd love for you guys to follow me there so you can see more things, some more tidbits of what I'm doing. And I also always like post what the new video is and things like that. So, all right, bye.